And the federal government today released its report promising to overhaul our broken migration system. But without a population plan and a lot of missing details, well, the reaction's been mixed.
It is broken, it is failing our businesses, it is failing migrants themselves. And most important of all, it is failing Australians. Because we as a country face some big national challenges that migration can help us resolve.
Big speech today by Claire O'Neill, but not a lot of detail. Now, as you know, I'm pro-immigration, but I'm dead set against using immigration as a cheap substitute for good policy. For too long, weak and lazy governments have relied on high migration to boost economic growth. Of course, more people makes the overall economy grow, but to make each of us individually better off, migrants have got to be more productive on average than the workers already here in Australia. In practice, higher migration means more demand for goods and services, therefore higher prices for the things you buy. Good, of course, for businesses that want to make a profit, but not so good for the rest of us who want to buy these things too. And a bigger supply of labour coming from overseas keeps our wages on the low side. That's why the higher overall GDP that migration produces does not necessarily translate into a better life for individual Australians. Now, the pandemic aside, Australia's had 3 decades of uninterrupted GDP growth in overall terms, but on 3 occasions we've had drops in GDP per head, which is why people sometimes don't feel richer, even when government says the overall economy is growing. The other problem too is that we keep talking about skilled migration, but as the pandemic showed, the jobs migrants mostly fill are cleaning and caring and driving, hospitality jobs, farm work, largely unskilled or semi-skilled jobs that Australians don't want to do or won't do at the wages we offer. Now, the reality of Australia's migration program, at least since the end of the Howard era, is that it's been about artificially pumping up economic growth and covering up for the fact that too many Australians prefer welfare to work and too many businesses would rather import workers on the cheap rather than train and pay locals. Remember, everyone who comes to this country, other than as a tourist or on a family reunion visa, requires a job, a home and a means to get around. That's why migration, at the numbers we've seen for nearly the last 2 decades, so that's well over 200,000 a year, has put downward pressure on wages, upward pressure on housing, and has put massive pressure on our roads and public transport. So there's plenty of reasons why we need to rethink our migration policy. I'm all in favour of the review, but not what came out today. The review today has as much wrong in it as it's got right. Above all, it sidesteps the key problem of immigrant numbers. On housing and the livability of our congested cities, there was nothing in today's report that gives us a plan to build the homes and the other infrastructure needed to keep net overseas migration at levels of the 300,000 plus that the Albanese government says we're going to take in. The report also seems confused on the issues of skills. On one hand, it says we need to prioritise attracting people who can build nuclear submarines for this country, really a high-end migrant, and attracting people who can then also do the net zero economy building. Now, that's probably more solar panel installers because most of the solar panels aren't made here. 90% of them come from China. So there's high-end jobs on one hand. But on the other hand, the report says, and I'll quote, evidence of growing labour shortages and lower paid occupations, particularly in the care sector, means we need an explicit migration program, it says, focusing on lower paid workers. Now, really, is the government finally going to come clean and admit that immigration is much less about skills than it is about filling the low-paid jobs Australians won't do? Lack of consistency in the report today. That would at least have the virtue of a bit of honesty. But it would also beg the question of what the government should be doing to get Australians off welfare and into work. Nothing at all on that today. And it'd also go against the whole skills rationale on which immigration for a long time has been justified. You know, we've got to keep bringing people in because we need these high-end skills. The report raises concerns about, quote, our inability to retain international students after study. But hang on, international education has long been sold to the public as a way for universities to earn export dollars, not as a backdoor migration scheme. And this, of course, matters because the sort of visa checks you make for someone coming here to study and then go home is very different to the visa checks you make for someone who's going to come here and then stay and live permanently. Home Affairs Minister Clare O'Neil used her speech today at the National Press Club to make what I thought were a whole lot of cheap political shots at the previous government, rather than give us much detail on some of the tough questions in the report. And when she was asked, she dodged the critical issue of our overall population, doubtless because her government's pushing a big Australia agenda, regardless of whether we can cope with it or not.
40 million, 30 million? What sort of number do you think Australia can cope with overall?
So it's an important question, but one that I'm not here to express a view on today. It's really important to me that we can have a conversation about migration policy in our country, which is not just reduced to the size of the population.
So who's looking at the total population?
Well, the population...
Whose responsibility would it be?
Well, it's not that it's not my responsibility, it's just that I think that really distracts from the issues that we're here to talk about today, which is a migration system that is fundamentally broken and not delivering for the country.
Now, it's gutless. It's her job, it's in her portfolio, but she doesn't want to talk about it. If Australia does need more skilled workers and there isn't someone already here who can do the job, or we can't wait to train up our own young people, of course, it's in our national interests that a suitable person comes from overseas to be employed, to pay taxes, and thereby to join Team Australia from day one. That person, of course, should be able to bring their children, their dependents. But right now, far too many people are coming to Australia on the basis of skills that don't readily translate into well-paid employment here. Now, I'm not saying they don't love Australia and that they won't make good citizens, but our immigration programs should be about boosting this country, not just boosting migrants, and certainly not pandering to the left's view that anyone who wants to come here can. I also think we need to have a look again at the right of migrants to bring their elderly parents to Australia. Now, no issue with dependent children and spouses. After all, they'll end up as taxpayers. But elderly parents or other relatives via family reunion, well, they're often a cost to the budget and our already struggling aged care and hospital system. So if we're going to have a fair income review into Australia's migration system, then this is just some of the issues that have got to be looked at, and not just this net zero workforce, which was a key part of today's focus.